Pause here. And whenever you're ready, you may begin.
Nib scratching across the paper, an artist quickly renders an image with ink and pen. You may have seen this during art class with Mr. Brandt, as you observed the concentration of a student absorbed in their work. Or maybe you were this person, diligently honing the sketch to perfection. Whether you are creating or observing this pen and ink artwork, one must be familiar with the techniques used to invoke a feeling of depth and shape within the sketch. Most commonly, hatching, line weight, and ink washing techniques are incorporated into these ink pieces. Now, with hatching, you will see my nib, my pen, has a nib at the tip. That's what it's called. And when you dip it into the ink, you want to have it halfway on the nib so it doesn't get too drenched, and tap it just a little bit. Now, angle it at about 45 degrees so it properly flows onto the paper. And when hatching are straight lines, either diagonal or parallel to each other, or even at various angles, as long as they are close up to each other, which shows different shading. The closer it is, the more shade you will see. If you look on your handouts, there's examples of this. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't hand them out. Yeah, you can see here. The closer, the more depth you'll see. And I remember the first time I had my pen and ink set, my first one. And I was so frustrated because it wouldn't draw correctly, the ink wouldn't flow correctly. So it turns out I didn't add enough water to the ink. So you'll want to remember to do that before you start, or else it'll be too thick and the ink won't write correctly. Now you can see how much darker it is over there. Applies more shading. And though multiple lines drawn together are an effective means of shading, one line, it can be shown also through one continuous line, which is where line weights comes in. Now, you can use, if you want to add more ink, just dip it again if it seems to be getting too light. So, for this technique, again, 45 degree, and you'll want to vary the pressure you put on the pen depending on the weight you want. So more pressure equals a darker line, less equals lighter. And so that indicates shading within your piece. And if you see on the handouts, yeah, the one with weight looks a lot more shaded. In these inks, and it's kind of plain, this is just black ink, so if you want, you can always get multiple colors. These inks come in multiple colors. And if you want a more exaggerated change in line width, I would suggest getting a fatter nib, because that'll have more exaggerated difference. Now we're done with the pen. You'll want to rinse it out in the water. Make sure to get it all out, or else it'll gunk up on the nib, and the nib won't be able to write as well. And then brush the ink, the rest in the water, out with the towel. See, it's clean. Now, ink can be used not only with fountain pens, but with brushes as well, which is where ink washing comes in. You want to dip your pen in water and either add water with ink to make it a lighter shade, or dip it directly into the ink, but that's very drastic. Let me show you how dark black, that is. So this isn't necessarily recommended for shading, but it's an interesting drawing technique. But for this, we're gonna have a lighter mixed in with water so as to not overpower the picture. You'll see here. Indicating deep shading in this area. Now, if you don't want it to be that dark, just add more water to it, and it'll be lighter, as you can see in this example. But you can still tell through this the hatching, which creates a really interesting effect. And it also can be a means of coloring, if you see, to show the difference between the, in this example, the snail's body and the shell. Now, you don't want to layer too many of these together. It'll make it darker, but it could also warp the paper and bring up the particles and make it less appealing and a bit messy. So you don't want to do that. And now, to clean out the brush, just mix it, dip it in the water. Try not to be too rough with it or else it could damage the bristles. Yeah, so gently towel it off and then let it dry. So regardless if you're an artist or just an onlooker, understanding these techniques will help familiarize yourself with this genre of artwork and will hopefully give you a new appreciation for it. These 3 techniques, hatching, line weight, and ink washing, are among the easiest and most commonly used in ink sketching. Now, go and ink sketches for all nations, drawing them in the name of depth, character, and feeling.
Thank you very much. Let's give her a round of applause.